Hi, I'm Jeff Carlisle, founding member, lead guitarist, and songwriter for the band 38 Special. First instrument that my parents wanted me to play, of course, was piano, like every good Italian boy. And the piano teacher said, well, don't waste your money on a piano because he may lose interest and then you're stuck with this large musical instrument. So they suggested you rent an accordion. So that was obviously not the most glamorous instrument for a 10-year-old boy to be lugging around. Its weight and you're pushing it this way and that. But I liked listening to music and hearing music. I started playing by ear. But February 9th, 1964, of course, that fateful night when the Beatles were on the Ed Sullivan Show, that was the real impetus to play guitar. And quite frankly, it was not the haircuts, it wasn't the suits, it wasn't the screaming girls and the fans. It was the electric guitar, just the actual physical look and image of the electric guitar just fascinated me. So I asked my dad, I said, can I play guitar? And he goes, well, just like you wanted to play piano. And I said, no, hang on, I didn't want to play piano. I didn't ask to play that, let alone an accordion. I definitely didn't want to play accordion. So he said, all right. So he bought me a $10 piece of firewood, which I still own to this day, and the rest is history. It's interesting, especially with my experience working with kids at Camp Jam. I see these 12-year-old kids that it's like looking in the mirror at myself when I was that age and seeing them passionate about music and playing in a band for the first time. And I basically was self-taught in the early days. I got a Mel Bay book and that $10 piece of firewood, and my parents knew I was passionate about playing the instrument because I took the guitar to bed with me and woke up with it in the morning when I came home from school. I did my homework and ate dinner and then was back to the guitar. After about 3 months, 3 to 6 months, I guess, of playing and teaching myself, a friend of mine, I was 7th grade at the time, and a friend of mine who was in the 9th grade, who was a pretty good guitar player, started giving me some lessons, just teaching me basic, kind of, as I call them, rock fundamentals. And he had a unique way of teaching where you didn't get bogged down with scales, which of course are very important. But at the time, it was just understanding how to get comfortable playing rock and roll music. And sure enough, after, I don't know, 3 months or so, he said, would you like to play rhythm guitar in my band? So I was amazed. I said, really? So that was my first band. I was in the 7th grade. I was 13 years old, and the band was called the Summer Sons, and it was Jacksonville, Florida. And it was a great experience. I still have. My mom was great because she took photographs like crazy, and I still have all the scrapbooks, and a lot of them are up on my website now. And I look back at it, and it's like, well, I had this Gibson Melody Maker guitar, and I was happy as can be. So that was my first band. I guess throughout the 60s, that was 1965. And throughout the 60s, met other people, went into other bands. The second band I had was a band called the Marshmallow Steam Shovel. And that was kind of the era where all of a sudden soul music was starting to come into play. So I was being influenced by a lot of the Memphis sound and the Detroit sound and Muscle Shoals sound, kind of getting out of the English invasion. And then the third real revelation, I guess, was the introduction to blues, which was Jimi Hendrix and Cream with Eric Clapton, not knowing that blues was the birthplace was in our own backyard with Howlin' Wolf and Muddy Waters and even B.B. King and Albert King and Freddie King and what have you. But the keyboard player in this band was considerably older than we were, kind of gave us that education. And that band was called the Doomsday Refreshment Committee, which is a name that I still really like today. I think I'm going to resurrect that name. And then finally, in high school, the last band I had was a band called Sweet Rooster, which had Donnie Van Zandt as a lead singer. And that was really the beginnings of 38 Special. When in 1970, I graduated high school and I left to go to college. I moved to Atlanta, Georgia, and went to Georgia Tech to study architecture. And it was one of the greatest experiences of my life, but also my exposure to a lot of other musicians and styles of music in Atlanta was very important, I think, in my development as a guitar player. Number one, country music. And a lot of the guys that were hanging around Atlanta and playing in music stores were great players, introduced me to guys like Jerry Reed, who was a big influence on me. Once again, not that I play like Jerry Reed, but I was playing pedal steel for a while, and I was playing some bluegrass and some dobro, and so I maintained. I have nails on this hand, so I utilized the Jerry Reed claw technique of playing. Just for example. And so that was unique. Songs like Amos Moses and we're just like, wow, this is a really cool way to play. So that technique gradually, I incorporated that gradually into my style of playing. So when I graduated from college in 1974, the economy was in terrible shape and nobody was building any buildings, and there was no work for a young Frank Lloyd Wright at the time. So I moved back down to Jacksonville, and 38 Special was formed basically by a bunch of high school friends that grew up together playing in different bands. Some of those bands I'd mentioned before. Donnie Van Zandt had been playing with Don Barnes, who was a friend we grew up with. And, our neighborhood back then, you could hit a 9-iron in any direction and hit somebody from Skinner or 38 Special. We all lived in the same community, and we all kind of hung out together. So that was, it made sense back then. There weren't a lot of options. You either went out and you played sports, or you played music. You didn't have computers, and you didn't have video games, and you didn't have cable TV. So there were a lot of bands back then playing. So it made sense for us to get back together, and it was all these guys that grew up in high school together, and it was I remember Donnie Van Zandt saying, "This is going to be a real serious effort. These guys all want to make this band work." So I was going to give it a couple of years, and anyway, I really believed in what we were doing, and that was in 1974 that we formed 38 Special. And initially, we were, we did cover songs. We played a lot of clubs, but we did cover songs, but very obscure cover songs, because so many people thought that we had written those songs. Well, that's a cool song. Yeah, we wrote that. Sure we did. It was some B-side of a ZZ Top album, or some Hourglass tune, or early Allman Brothers song. But all those bands that influenced us in the early days, it was the same for all of us. Bands like Mountain, Leslie West and Mountain in the late 60s. Stylistically in the 70s, of course, Bad Company, or even prior to that, bands like Free. And even though we were a Southern band, our influences were different than most. We were more of an English band, as Skinner was, as far as our influences, the Rolling Stones, Free, and what have you. So gradually we kind of combined that with the inspirations that we got from bands like the Allman Brothers and Leonard Skinner, and we started recording our own music. Not very successful at first, because we were trying to emulate what everybody else did. And then finally, in 1979, we figured we've got to try something different. And we were inspired by some other groups and music at the time that gave us a little bit of a road turn. Probably the biggest influence for me and for the band, as far as songwriting goes, was a band called The Cars. And people say, we don't hear that. And our trademark, or our signature song, really to this day, is probably Hold On Loosely, even though it wasn't the highest charting song, but people associate 38 Special with Hold On Loosely. And I remember the very first time I heard a song by The Cars called You're Just What I Needed. And I didn't like the song at first. I thought the vocals were strange. I thought the melody was strange. It was a little quirky, and I didn't understand it. And the third time I heard it on the radio, I didn't understand it, and I didn't like it. And the fifth time I started singing along with it, and then after I heard the song a dozen times, I was going, this is the coolest thing in the world. Well, here's an example of how you have to listen to everything. You don't have to like everything, but never go through life with musical blinders on, because that's how you make something your own, just by picking up these influences. So the song Just What I Needed started off, it was in the key of E, and it was... basically that. All eighth notes, right? And everybody's heard this song. Well, I played that for a while. One day I went, hold on loosely. So the point is, it's almost the same time signature. It's all eighth notes, and it was like that light bulb came on, and I went, wow, how simple is that? It's very rudimentary, it's very elementary, and very basic and primitive almost, and just, which, you could say that, of course, Led Zeppelin, all those things, but it was so moving. So that was, for me, the light bulb, where it's like we had been playing all this country rock music and trying to sound like Charlie Daniels and Marshall Tucker and every other permutation of every Southern band that was out there, realizing we're not going to get very far with this. So one day, that was the birth of Hold On Loosely came out as an inspiration from the Cars, and Don Barnes had this great title and had this great line, hold on loosely, but don't let go. If you cling too tightly, you're going to lose control. We took that, developed the song, and worked with our good friend Jim Peterick from the band The Ides of March originally and Survivor, and we created Hold On Loosely. And it was 3 different directions and inputs and influences that turned into something that fortunately was very successful for 38 Special. It's funny, every kid growing up, you want to be known as the lead guitarist. You want to be the lead guitarist in your band. If you're the lead guitarist, then you're really good. And you don't realize until much later that rock and roll is all about playing rhythm guitar. It's all about just playing grooves, playing rhythms. Pete Townsend, of course, is the epitome of a rock and roll rhythm guitar player. But I realized at a certain point, there are some great players out there, but as a soloist, what did I really want to do? And not being much of a singer, my only option was to be able to sing with my guitar. So the important thing for me was, when it was my turn to make a statement after the 2 verses and the 2 choruses were gone, and it was solo opportunity, was to make that statement and to take up the slack where the singer left off and make it at least as good as what he did, if not better. In doing this, in that thought process, of course, I'd mentioned guitarists like Leslie West, who just had such a very simple player, but a very strong statement, very tasteful in the way he played. Duane Allman, another inspiration. But I guess once again, the light bulb came on is when I heard Queen the first time, and Brian May, who's to this day one of my all-time heroes. I went, that's the way you do it, because you could sing his guitar solos, you could sing those melodies. And yeah, I love playing blues, I love playing all styles of music, and it's great to just get together with your friends and do a 1-4-5 or whatever it is, and just play off the top of your head and rip some blues. But that structure of singing a melody and making every note count in a song was very important. So Brian May, once again, huge influence. Another very underrated guitar player, Barry Bailey, played with Roy Orbison and, of course, with the Atlanta Rhythm Section for many years, was the epitome of combining absolute perfect tone with the style that he played in. So I think that has to go hand in hand. Your tone somewhat dictates your style. We always say as musicians, like, oh, Larry Carlton has such a fantastic tone. What a great sound. How does he get it? I wish I had that. Well, you could walk up to Larry Carlton, pick up his guitar and his amp and play through it. You're not going to sound anything like him. It's the way your fingers and your mind play that tone, and that's what makes you unique. So I realized that as well. That Brian May, Barry Bailey, Leslie West, all these guys had tremendous tone, but they utilized that tone as part of their character. So fast forwarding to Hold On Loosely, and then later on our first top 10 song, Caught Up in You, and then Fantasy Girl, which were all had very melodic solos. That's the way I approached them. And I would take the basic tracks home with me from the studio, and I'd put them on, and I wouldn't even pick up a guitar. I'd keep it in its case, and I'd just sit there and I would sing my guitar solo. over the track, just trying to get some ideas. How would I like a guitar solo to sound? So eventually I would hit on something, and then I'd pick up the guitar, and I'd have to kind of find what I was doing, and I'd get a basic roadmap, some themes, which I'll demonstrate later on, some just where I wanted the solo to go. And I'd go back in the studio and I'd lay that down, and then with input from our producer Rodney Mills and Don Barnes, so wow, we really like the way you're thinking here. Let's take it this way, and we would open up some other tracks and, quite frankly, listen to them and say, I'd really like this and I really like that, and maybe we'd do some combinations, or I'd go back and restructure the solo. But it was very methodical, and I would get frustrated because I said, God, why can't I just rip a solo like that off the top of my head? But it's, you know what? It doesn't matter how you accomplish the end result, because if the end result is good, it's going to last for eternity, and that's what you can hang your hat on. So I get the real turning point for 38 Special was 1979, and our first top 40 song was a song called "Rockin' Into the Night." But in 1981, when "Hold On Loosely" came out, that was finally the real, okay, we've arrived, and the critics who at one point said, you know, another Southern rock band, just what we need, riding on the coattails of everybody who's done it before. Now they're saying, hey, the band that's carrying the banner for the South and really rising to the occasion. And of course, you know, in the 80s, it was much more important for the career and success of an artist to be on top 40 radio. It wasn't so much just the underground and FM radio anymore that could create a career. You had to be in the mainstream of rock. So fortunately, Hold On Loosely came around at a good time, and I'll never forget, we were at the Rainbow Music Hall in Denver, Colorado, and a gentleman came up to me with a camera and introduced himself, and he said, I'd like to know if I could film your concert tonight. I'm representing a company called Music Television. And I said, oh, what's that all about? And he says, well, we do these videos of bands, and we're going to put it on cable TV and what have you. And I said, well, I better check with my manager. So we went to a payphone, called New York, and he says, yeah, that's fine. They can go ahead and shoot it. And I told the guy, I said, good luck with that venture of yours. I really hope it's going to work out. True story. So August 1st of 2006, they celebrated the 25th anniversary of MTV, and I was watching it just for grins to see what the first hour had to hold, and sure enough, we were the 13th video ever aired on MTV with Hold On Loosely. So that was, it was the dawning of that era that we were the beginning of that part of music history. So, you know, Hold On Loosely all of a sudden became an iconic song for us, and we went in 1983 to do the Special Forces album and wrote a song called Caught Up in You, which was slightly derivative in the sense that you had that movement going to the major third of the B. And the ever-present eighth notes once again. So what was happening is all of a sudden, as a band, 38 Special was developing a style and a trademark sound that people were buying. I mean, they liked it. They said, well, it's really not Southern. Well, no, it wasn't Southern, but I think the real part of Southern music that's missed is the attitude and how these bands played their music. There was an aggressiveness, there was a real spirit, and put it right in your face quality. So yeah, we were using pop elements, but they were still blues based, and we just played with a real attitude. So that was basically our trademark, and that's how it works. And we stuck with it, and we wrote it as long as we could. We had other songs, "Back Where You Belong," which the ever-present eighth notes, and just a reinvention of that sound. And it was a wonderful. We were very fortunate. We really had a full decade plus of success with the band. Great memories of touring. We opened for everybody from Johnny Winter to Peter Frampton to Kiss to ZZ Top. 2 years, very memorable years, were working with the Starship and working with them, Craig Chaquiso and Mickey Thomas and Grace. All those people were wonderful to us. And we got to the point in the early, probably 84 or so, where we were legitimate headliners. We continued to meet great friends. Huey Lewis and the News was an opening act for us in 1984, Bon Jovi in 1986. And we all hung out and learned from these players. The guys in Rush were wonderful to us, and in the early 80s when we toured together. It's all that experience of learning music and sharing music with all these people. So I'm forever grateful. I mean, the average lifespan of a band is what, 3 or 4 years in this world, and to have gone certainly with riding the crest for 11 years, I consider myself very fortunate. I want to take a few minutes to tell you about my Explorer. So many people over the years have asked me questions about it, and now I'm finding out that on internet sites there are chat rooms on exactly what it is, what's it made of, who made it, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to give you a little background and history. This guitar was actually built for me in early 1975, late 74, early 75, by a luthier by the name of Jay Ryan, Rhyne. He lived in Atlanta, Georgia. And back when I was here in college and Leonard Skinner was coming up to Atlanta in the early 70s to play, he was the only guy that could do everything from setups to fret jobs and guitar repair and whatever. And we used to go out to his shop, and he built guitars. He built beautiful acoustic instruments and arch tops and mandolins, and he built a few electric guitars as well. So in 1974, Alan Collins, guitarist for Leonard Skinner, who wrote Free Bird and played that great outro solo on it, was a good friend of mine. We grew up together. And he bought an original Explorer from George Gruen in Nashville. And I'll never forget, he paid $4,000 for it, which even today, that's a lot of money, but back then it was unheard of. It's a used guitar. But I always loved Explorers. I idolized Alan. He was just such a great friend. I always wanted an Explorer and said, well, I'll never be able to afford one. I thought one day I'd get one built. So Alan gave me his original Explorer, said, here, just take it. Go make a template. You can trace it out, take measurements, whatever you want to do. And I took it to Jay Ryan, and as a result, I got my Explorer. And over the years, this has been my stage guitar. I've recorded with it, used it in the studio, but ironically, as I showed you before, the Gold Tops, the deluxe that I played those solos on Hold On Loosely and Caught Up in You and Fantasy Girl and other songs, that was really my main studio guitar. I did use this in the studio, but not nearly as much. However, it was my primary stage guitar, and probably is the guitar that most people associate me with. So the guitar, once again, it's shaped as a Gibson Explorer. It was modeled after Alan's original. Some of the unique differences: number one, instead of being Carina, it's maple. It's a solid maple guitar. Because maple is such a dense wood and heavier than Carina, the actual width of the body, the thickness of the body, is probably somewhere between 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch thinner than an actual Explorer. If it was the same thickness, it would have been so heavy you just really couldn't have played the guitar. And it's heavy enough as it is. It's probably, this rivals a Les Paul, so this is probably a 9.5-pound guitar. As you'll notice on the fingerboard, the actual fingerboard itself is Brazilian rosewood, and you'll see birds flying down the neck in different positions. These are actually hawks. And there was a gentleman that worked for Jay Ryan that actually his real talent, his expertise was doing mother of pearl inlays on guitars. So that was a unique feature, obviously. The binding around the guitar, just little features. It was double binding, front and back. And you can see the wood is really beautiful. It's a nice piece of burl maple. And you can see the fiddleback on the edges here. Headstock is very Explorer-esque. It's slightly different design, a little bit heftier, a little thicker for strength reasons. Jay's name there in abalone. And the another unique feature that a lot of people wonder and question is the pick guard, which technically is not really a pick guard. There was a what they call a finishing check, a flaw in the wood that ran basically through the body, and it was such a nice piece of maple he didn't want to lose that, but he wanted to disguise that. And I remember suggesting, well, just screw a pick guard on, and he said, no, we can't do that. This is much more a piece of art um, than anything else, and we can't let that happen. So I said, what are you going to do? And he drew out templates, several different templates and designs. And what he did is took a piece of the same Brazilian rosewood for the fingerboard, cut out this shape, and this is actually inset. It's flush into the maple of the guitar body. So it's actually a nice design element. As far as the electronics go, these are original series. When I say original series, the very early series of DiMarzio humbucking pickups. This is a super distortion in the neck position, and in the bridge position, it's a dual sound, which is basically a super distortion in one coil tap configuration, and then it throws it out of phase so that you get a little brighter, cleaner sound in the other. So a dual sound, a super distortion, uh, real early pickups. They sound great, and it just came together as a total package that just felt comfortable in my hands. Very different neck than say a Les Paul, or at least the later series, the late '60s Les Pauls. It's a fairly fat neck, very 59ish Les Paul, but it's not quite as wide a fingerboard, so it feels a little bit more narrow this way. But once I get used to playing this, that feels very funny. It feels foreign. And that's about it. A couple of tone control, the volume controls, a couple of tone controls for the pickups, and there it is, my Explorer, and I love it. And all the guys in the road crew used to call it the dining room table because it was so big, but it's seen a lot of places, made a lot of good music. In 1997, that was pretty much the end for me in 38 Special, and it had been the majority of my life, nearly 25 years since the formation of the band. And at the time, took a little bit of, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. Took a bit of time off, spent some time with my family, and worked on some other projects that were music slash NASCAR related, and but it all worked. And finally, I got the bug to get back into music and put together a band, just actually by accident, a band called Big People, which was a combination of musicians from different groups. It was myself, uh, great guitar player Pat Travers, Derek St. Holmes, who was with Ted Nugent in the glory days and his singer for many, many years in the 70s. Liberty DeVito, Billy Joel's drummer, and then of course the late great Benjamin Orr from the Cars, one of my heroes, as you well know. And we just had a really good time for a year and a half, and we did some tours with Styx, and we were starting to write as a band, and it was like this rebirth for me as a musician, because now all of a sudden I'm exposed to four guys from all different backgrounds and areas, and to have the opportunity to play with a guy like Liberty DeVito was just like a dream come true for me. Benjamin Orr, once again, being one of my all-time heroes, it was an exciting time. And unfortunately, we lost Ben to cancer very, very early in his short life, but the inspiration lives on, and as a result, Liberty and Derek and I have remained friends, and we still work together as musicians, and we play together, but they're also very instrumental in helping me with my current project, which is Camp Jam. About 3 years ago, my partner, Dan Lipson, and myself decided that we wanted to do something together musically, but we didn't know exactly what, and he had some experience putting some kids in after-school marketing, after-school sports programs. And I always loved working with kids, and I thought, gee, if I had had something like this when I was a kid growing up, it would have really kind of raised the learning curve for me, accelerated it, and it would have really been beneficial. So we started Camp Jam 3 years ago in Atlanta, Georgia, and it's a summer rock and roll day camp for kids 11 to 17. And what we realized very quickly was that a lot of these kids had not had the experience of playing in bands before. They came to the camp to be in a band, and in 5 days from meeting other like-minded musicians for the first time, 5 days later on Friday night, they were sharing a stage and doing a concert and performing in front of their friends and family. And what this was doing was really creating tremendous, teaching them teamwork skills. It's like in sports they say it's the ultimate team building experience, and it may be, but for me, being in a band, you count to four and the game begins, and it's only a 5-minute game, unless it's Freebird, but nobody can drop the ball. If anybody drops the ball in that 5-minute game, the entire team loses, and you don't have the third quarter to fix it. You don't have the seventh inning to fix it, or what have you. You work together as a team. And one of the things I always explain to musicians, young and old, is that when you go to concerts and you'd see 38 Special up there, or any band that you went to see, and we're all throwing our shapes and smiling and having a good time, it's not always easy. We're not always having a good time because there's something technically going wrong, or we can't hear something, and so we rely on our comrades and our other mates in the band to help us out, to make eye contact with the drummer, for someone to pull you up and make sure that the show goes on, because as an audience goes, you want to be entertained, and we can't afford to let you walk away thinking we had a bad time. So that's why being in a band is really the ultimate team building experience. Proud to say that after 3 years, we're in 10 cities right now. We probably had close to 2,000 kids go through the camp in 2006, and we'll be continuing to expand and get Camp Jam out there. We have some other programs with Camp Jam that deal with younger children, and then also some team building skills being taught with music to corporations. So the bottom line is it's all about the music, and the fastest growing segment in the industry right now is people playing recreational music, or music for recreational purposes. So you're seeing a lot of 40-somethings that are putting the golf clubs back in the closet and dusting off the guitars and playing, and you're seeing more kids out there wanting to be musicians today, which I think is great, especially with so much of the funding for the music and arts being pulled. So Camp Jam is my life right now. I'm able to reach out to my friends that I've played music with professionally over the years, who see the vision and share the vision that I have for it, and they're there to help me and to work with the kids. If you want to find out more about it, you can go to campjamusa.com and check it out. Having had obviously experience with Camp Jam and working with some great instructors, and looking back in the days when I was learning to play guitar, I question and ask myself the question many times: what's the best way to learn? Can you do it from a videotape? Can you do it from the internet? And there are programs that are available, computer programs, internet sites, and what have you. And I've always thought that there's really no substitute to one-on-one interaction with an instructor to help you learn to play an instrument, no matter what it is. And I remember the very first time I saw iVideo tunes in a demo example of instruction, I was blown away, because it was the first time where I could go to a site and look at something, and it would come up and start teaching me before I lost interest in the instrument and went back out to do something else. I mean, quite frankly, that's part of it. You get inspired to learn, and you want to go and do it. The technology that I saw too was fascinating, because it was not only crystal clear, and there were no, you were looking at hands, you were looking at human interaction basically, and you weren't looking at dots that were moving around this nebulous fretboard. So at that point in time, I realized now you can see there's perfect explanation on seeing what the instructor is doing, where the finger positionings are, and then also being able to correlate that to a graphic fretboard position to show how a song is played. So to me, I was sold. That was it, and that's why I'm here talking to you right now, because I think this is the way to do it. And with with iTunes and the access to so many great songs, combining the artists with those songs, I think it's the way to go. Hi, I'm Jeff Carlisle from 38 Special. It's nice to be with you today. I'm going to show you a song that 38 Special recorded on our fourth album, which was Wild Eyed Southern Boys. And a lot of people ask me, of all the songs that I've written or played guitar on, which one am I really most proud of? And this is certainly one of them, if not at the top of the list, right up there. It's a song called Fantasy Girl. Fantasy Girl was a song that, first of all, it's in the key of E. And it's very signature or trademark of some of the other songs that I was involved with or co-written, especially from the guitar approach and the soloing aspect of it. Very melodic solo, and I'm going to point out in a few minutes some of the kind of the trademark signature licks, once again through a major key, but just twisting them a little bit more on this song and kind of the thought process that went into it. So, and I'm also going to break the song down too in the signature or the riff of the song, the chorus section, and some of the unique or idiosyncrasies of the song that make it unique. The song was written by myself and once again our good friend Jim Peterick from the band Survivor, and of course Ides of March before that. And 38 Special was in Chicago playing a concert, and Jim came by to check out the band and hang out with us, and we were back at the hotel. He said, "You've been working on anything?" And I had this idea for the song, and I was playing it over and over again at rehearsals back in Jacksonville and sound checks, and had a couple of parts to it, and I said, well, this is something I've been working on. So we started running with it and playing it, and he says, what does it remind you of? What does it make you feel like? And I said, I don't know. It's just it's a very, once again, because it's in the major key, uplifting, a very triumphant sounding song. And he said, was there any inspiration to it? I said, it's probably one of those nights where you're sitting there watching TV and, drool hanging out your mouth, and you're, oh, that was cool. What was that? And you start playing it and developing it. But I said, I don't know. Every time I play it, I think about, pretty girl walking down the street. And he said, maybe a fantasy girl. And I said, that's why you're owed the big bucks. Great title. And that's how it started. So stand by, and I'm going to show you how to play it. And if you're in a band, it's going to be easy. All right, I'd like to show you the intro to Fantasy Girl, and basically the intro is a prelude to the verse. It's the same thing. And this was the original lick that kind of gave birth to the song. And once again, I don't remember exactly how I came up with it or why I did. First of all, the only thing I can tell you is that the technique, once again, is holding the pick between the thumb and the forefinger, and then using my third and fourth fingers to pick the chord. Once again, that clawing technique that I've kind of developed from playing pedal steel and dobro over the years. It's that whole Jerry Reed, that kind of thing. So I kind of made it my own and worked it into my style. So here's the intro. Of course, one guitar is just playing open chords, E and B. But the figure itself is so basically you're taking an E chord and then adding the A note on your G string with your little finger and pedaling it using the pick, pedaling the low E string with your pick, playing the major third and the tonic note on the D string, which is the E, the G sharp. So if you did it without the pedaling, it would be enough, right? But if you... Okay, then the second formation is to the B. And you're just glissing up or just crescendoing up from the E note, F sharp, B, transitioning. And that's just the B over the A. Again, using the claw technique. But you can do it with a pick. You can even do the whole figure like that. It's just a little snappier. As opposed to, it's harder to mute it, so you get a lot of other strings ringing out. And then you just go, so that's an A flat, F sharp, E. And that leads into the verse, and the verse is exactly the same thing. Okay, so that's your intro and your verse. Now the next part of Fantasy Girl is what I call the pre-chorus, or the B section, and this is the transition between, or the bridge between, the verse and the chorus. So I'm just going to play a bar of the verse and come out of that to show you where it goes. Okay, so what I'm doing there is coming out of the B on the verse, building it up, and it goes to C sharp minor, to the A, to an E, full E's with just ones and fives. Nice full, no major thirds, nothing but just E's and B's. Back to the A, to the B, building up, going into the chorus. So, once again, and also the percussive, the muted percussion between the chords is part of the feel. So it's, and that's just a gliss into sliding all the way from the open E to the G sharp into the A. Okay, now I'll play the verse one more time, or one measure of the verse into that, so you can see how it transitions. Okay, now on to the chorus. Okay, now the chorus of Fantasy Girl is actually my favorite part of the song. There's a part of it that I'm going to show you. I don't really know where it came from. It was probably an accident, and that's how a lot of times things in songs and songwriting come about. You just do something, you go, and that's pretty cool. But I'm going to show you the whole thing slowly, and then we'll play it in real time. Once again, the nice fat modal E. And then this is unique. This is basically an F sharp minor to an F sharp minor 7. So if you got, that's a F sharp minor, F sharp minor 7. So it's, can you see what I'm doing there? So, and you're playing all those, not playing the A string or the E string. Basically, those 3 strings, B, G, and D. Then to the D, walk that down so that you're getting the major third of the A. To the B, and then this is kind of very Rolling Stones. So that's A, glistening up to the C sharp, E on the D string, B to the E flat, F sharp, back to the E. You'll notice once again between all those chord changes that there's the percussive rhythm. So, and that's kind of important in the feel of the song. It's just that kind of being a shuffle, especially, and that's what basically the feel of the song is. It is a shuffle. So I'm going to play, just to kind of put it all together for you. Play the verse. Play the B section that we went over to, or the that we went over with the pre-chorus, as I said that, into the chorus, and then you can see how it all goes together. So we'll do 2 times around with the intro, into the verse, the B section, and the chorus. Okay. Now, after the second chorus, that leads directly into the first guitar solo. And that really is very simple. It goes over the top of, it starts over the top of the verse chords. And the vocal comes back in on the pre-chorus, but the guitar is still playing behind it. And it resolves, the solo resolves out of that part, so it doesn't actually play over the chorus. What happens at that point in time is it's basically a breakdown in the chorus, or at the very end of the chorus. And the part is, and I'll explain how it, in context, how it comes out of it, but it's basically E, A, So to the D, to the B. Last one, chorus. All right, so what happens is it comes out of the solo, and I'm going to play the pre-chorus into that part that I just showed you, and then once it gets back to the chorus, it's vocal chorus out, guitar starts coming in, and then the outro guitar solo is all against chorus chords. So B section, or pre-chorus, at the end of the first solo. Do it one more time. Okay, let's take a look at the first solo in Fantasy Girl, which is somewhat abbreviated. But one of the things with guitar solos, when you listen to a track, whether you hear it on the radio or whether you're listening to it on your CD or your iPod, is to hear the tonality of where is the solo starting. I mean, you might be able to envision the phrasing, but is it being played on a B string, on the G string, or whatever? So if you get off to the right start, just knowing where the solo starts and what the mindset is, it's a lot easier to figure out the rest of it. This solo actually starts on the B string, and once again, this is we're in the key of E, so we're in E major, and the solo actually starts on the F sharp note, stretched to the G sharp, which is the major third of the E. So to the E, to the C sharp, okay? That's the intro of that solo. And then once again, thinking major key. All in that range. We go from here. E note, E flat, to the B, okay, then to the F sharp, resolving on the B again. Now this next figure is actually one of my favorites. It's so simple. It's an E chord, right? But the phrasing of it is what makes it sound unique. So you go. Now it goes into the B section again, which is the... All right, at that point in time, the vocal comes back in, and actually, at that point too, there's one little trick. The B section, when it comes back in, it's so it starts on the D as opposed to the C sharp, and obviously playing a D on the solo part or the phrasing of the guitar won't work against the C sharp. So at that point, out of the solo, so E note, and then a little kind of classical run. And that leads into that. And then there's some echo stuff, and during the solo in real time, I'll show you basically that I'm just stretching the F sharp to the G sharp. Resolving in the high stratosphere of the mother of all E's. So that's it. Basically, that's the solo. Starts on the E string. I mean the B string. I'm sorry. Against the progression, then. This is in harmony, but this is the tonic part. All right, let's go to the end solo. Now the outro solo for Fantasy Girl plays strictly over the chorus chords. And there's some arrangement things, some accents that the bass and guitars are doing ensemble, and you'll be able to hear those readily enough when you listen to it. But there's also another guitar part that's kind of it's a jangly, as I call it, a Byrds guitar part. Don Barnes actually played this on the record and played it live, and it really adds some color to it. So while the chorus chords are going on, and once again, there are so many things that are going on in this track. I think I had 12 tracks alone just for myself for the solos and the guitar parts and the rhythms that I was playing. So and that's just for me, not any of the other guitars that are going on. So it becomes a mixing nightmare, and where you put things, and you'll hear in the intro and all through the song, you hear a lot of harmony arrangements, kind of reminiscent of maybe some Boston stuff. It's kind of an influence. Some Queen, Brian May, 3-part harmonies on guitars, and to show you those right now, half of them I probably don't remember, and you'd go crazy trying to figure them out. But you'll hear them, and you can kind of do your own interpretation. But this one part, if you're in a band, you got 2 guitar players, this is definitely one part that's pretty cool, and this goes against the chorus chords on the outro during the solo. It starts on the E note on the B string and the high E note, and basically just walks down. All on the B and E string. So it's from an E to an E flat, right? To a C sharp, to a B. That's the first half of it. To the second half is starting on the D note on the B string. D, C sharp, B. Then the A note on the G string. So So again, the first half, second half. Now to the B, honoring the B chord, B note on the G string, B note, B string open, and the F sharp on the high E string. Back to the A. Okay, so in real time, so very colorful part, adds a nice texture, and that's something you should definitely put in there if you're going to play the song live. All right. Let me show you a few things about the outro solo that people have asked me about. Most of it's pretty simple, and you'll be able to hear it. It's, once again, if you know your major scales, you'll be able to find most of these. A lot of it's phrasing, but there are a couple of things that are kind of unique. Once again, the solo starts on the B string, so the opening figures, it's like little half step bend, real bluesy. Up to the B, stretching. Now this is just kind of an old Duane Allman Brothers. So once again, the major scale. Now this is one of my favorite licks, just the way it sits into the track. It's so you go from the high E note on the E string to the B note on the B string, C sharp, G sharp on the G string, A, back to the B. All right, if you can remember that one, just the timing of it, that'll really get you a long ways. Very simple, nothing complicated about it by any means, but it really changes the rhythm up and makes a statement on its own. So that, and then also there's a figure. This is all playing in that whole E inversion major. See where I'm going with it? And then, of course, it finally gets at the resolve of the solo. Kind of very reminiscent of Caught Up in You with the major scale as opposed to the old Jimmy Page. Change it immediately by putting in the major third of the E, the G sharp, to a major. Okay, let's try the solo. Let's try the whole song. How about that? Crank it up. Let's go. Okay, I'm going to do a performance of Fantasy Girl now, so if you just want to watch, that's great, or if you want to pick up your guitar and play along, that's cool too. So hang on to what you got, and let's see what happens here. Here we go.
Lately I'm learning so many yearnings are never to be. Childhood illusions, merely delusions of a girl that I see. In my mind's eye, I see clearly a vision of how it could be. Me and my fantasy girl. Hold on to me. Be my fantasy girl. Don't set me free. I've had my share, and sometimes I swear that